sound, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Patrik from CookieLab, and my talk will be focused mostly on visual regression testing, which it's a bit clickbaity right here, but yeah, sorry about that. First things first, Patrik from CookieLab. I am a full stack developer, most TypeScript and Python, so a lot of React as well. We do a lot of other things as well if you want to check it out. We have also stickers over there next to the code track on the table under the tree, whatever it is there. And if you want like more about me, it's on my webpage, which is just like side hobby that I didn't finish. So yeah, typical stuff. So let's get to the meat and the potatoes of the talk, which is actually the visual regression testing. It seems like a mouthful right here, but it's pretty simple stuff. The testing is obvious, I hope, but the visual regression might be a bit more like advanced. Regression obviously is a bug that we introduce into our system by accident, like something we don't see in our test or during the code review, and it breaks something that we don't expect it to. And visual is obviously just like looking at it. So in this case, visual regression testing would be looking at our front end to see if any changes were made to it by accident when we like update our dependencies, for example, Tailwind, things like that. So I would like to take it as a journey through what I did at my previous company, where my task was, because I had a lot of free time, just to prepare some visual regression testing for our multiple front ends. We had some in React, some like static stuff, and we wanted to make sure that we had it tested. And there were some like strong constraints, especially that my budget was 0 crowns. So a lot of stuff, a lot of fun work, and other constraints were like security, so I couldn't run it on somewhere outside our infrastructure. It couldn't connect to the internet. Yeah, it wasn't very great. And in the end, I ended up with Cypress because it is like the thing that I knew at the time. I looked into Playwright and things like Storybook, but for example, for our front ends, Storybook wasn't very flexible for the static stuff. It was mostly like reactable components. And at the time, Playwright, I was very scared of it, so I just let it be. But from what I did like today in the morning, Playwright actually has integrated into it already. So if you are using Playwright, this will apply as well, at least the latter part of the talk. Yeah. So I decided on Cypress, and Cypress out of the box, it can take screenshots, which is great, but it has no way of comparing them like together. If you have some base images, it just can't tell you what's okay. So there comes Cypress plugins. There's a lot. Cypress has a long list of visual plugins, and some of them are specifically made for visual regression. For my needs at the time, a lot of them weren't suitable. Most of them, as you can see in the top left, they wanted project tokens so that they would either run on someone else's infrastructure, or that I would upload my screenshots there, and then they would run their code on it to know if it is okay or not. So that wasn't an option. The other plugins, they were hidden behind this big square button, contact us for enterprise support, which to me, at least like a very introverted person, the call with the salesperson is insane. And especially since I had no budget, I couldn't use that obviously. Then there are some that use a lot of buzzwords like visual AI or something like that, which I think is overkill for what I wanted to do, of just like taking a screenshot and comparing it pixel by pixel. And fortunately, there are some open source tools. However, not a lot of them are updated very often. As you can see here, 6 years ago is one of the top 6 plugins, I think, or something like that I took a screenshot of. So it is a lot of choices, but only a few of them were very viable. And in the end, I landed on this one. The naming is pretty on the nose, and it's very simple stuff. It uses the screenshot feature provided by Cypress. So it just takes the screenshot And if you are generating those screenshots, it will save them into your repository, so you can commit them with your code. And if you are running the test, it will just compare your actual screenshot of what you have on the screen with your base screenshots. And a lot of other plugins, like for the Playwright, work the same way. So what I will show you here will be like applicable to other ecosystem as well. It is open source, available online, and it runs locally in your Cypress. So there's like no connecting to the internet, nothing like that. So that was perfect. And like the first step I took was just like this very simple step of a static website. And it just does 3 things. Visit the website, make sure it is loaded by seeing the visible element, and then it takes the screenshot. This is the command is same for generating and for testing. And all you have to provide is the name of the screenshot, and if you want to capture the whole viewport or the full page, like the basic stuff that's in Cypress. And then there's the error threshold that says like how many % of the pixels can be different between the base image and your actual image. So that was great, and it worked without an issue, at least for my first run with the website. The screenshot it took was something like this. This is from the example project that I will show later. And there's like one small problem with the score bars, and that's because I can't do good CSS. It looked fine on my MacBook, but when I run it inside like the CI/CD pipeline, this happened. So yeah, this is also good for like checking that your stuff works on other computers as well. Yeah, and this is like the difference image that it will generate as well. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it is grayscale, and the text is there. And if there will be any changes, there will be like red and yellow pixels. And the setup is pretty easy. It just needs some variables in the Cypress config, like where you store your images, where you store your base images, if you're getting the images up every time. And then there's the one small issue that it hijacks your screenshot folder. So if you are taking screenshots of Cypress already in your tests, this will mingle with them as well. And there's like one setting that allows you to trash your whole assets, your screenshots. So this will like delete the whole folder. So this is one of the things to be aware of, that it can be dangerous. And with this done, I was very happy because it worked. So I came to my colleagues, and you know, not every colleague has a MacBook. Some of them have Windows, some have Linux. And I was like very hopeful that Cypress will handle it, no issue. Well, as you can see here, this is the example of like some diff image that is very wrong. Usually you would see just like the image, like the text there that would be black, but all of these red and yellow pixels in there means they mean a difference between the base image and the actual image. So this whole thing would be like, I don't know, 50% error. And that's obviously not a good way to run your tests if you want to run them on multiple environments. So like we tried to debug this. This is a bit exaggerated, but this is what happened with every piece of text, every font that was on the page. And we weren't sure what was happening because every other component, like buttons, everything like that, had no issues in there. So I had to scour the internet for like what is wrong with my test, because to my eyes, and to everybody's eyes as well, it looked the same. Like the two images were identical, but there were like still some small errors in there. Yeah, and the culprit was anti-aliasing, which is a theme for a whole another talk, and I'm not even sure how it works perfectly. But to explain it a bit better, it just takes the vector image, like a font, then converts them to pixels, and the anti-aliasing just adds like some half pixels, some gray pixels to make it look to our eyes from far away that it's actually round text or like round assets, and not just like Minecraft. And on the left you can see how it works, the anti-aliasing, and on the right you can see a different anti-aliasing strategies, because every operating system has a different strategy for this kind of asset handling. These three images or three texts all came from Windows XP. So even on the same system you might have like a few different approaches. And this explained why my tests weren't working on tests of my colleagues, because on macOS it was fine because I was running on the same system every time. But my colleague, when they ran it on Linux or on Windows, they had a different strategy. That meant that their error threshold was much, much higher. So this begs the question, how to solve this? And since I'm lazy, as every good programmer, I did the laziest thing possible, and that was increase the error threshold. Just naively, I was raising the threshold by 5%, by 5%, and 5%, until the test started to pass everywhere. Yeah, with this strategy, you might already see some obvious problems. The main one of them was that to get it running on our CI/CD pipeline, which had Linux and that had different strategy for anti-aliasing as well, I had to raise it to 25%. And yeah, with 25%, you pretty much can have quarter of the screen just black box, and it would still pass. Yeah, so that was a painful discovery, and it like forced me to think of a proper solution, and that was to have the same environment for every test run. But since I had a MacBook, the first thought was, let's buy a MacBook for everybody. But with the budget of 0 crowns, that wasn't very possible, and like running your CD pipeline on MacBooks isn't like very cost efficient as well. So the next best thing is probably getting same software everywhere, and that can be done with Docker pretty easily. Oh, I forgot about this thing. There was also, as I talked about the capture viewport, there's also option of full page, which will scroll through the page and then it will stitch together the screenshots. That introduced other problems as well. Like when we stitched the screenshots together, there might have been a big white box, like out of nowhere. And as I realized, the stitching and the scrolling wasn't very reliable. So I had to like use this algorithm for scrolling the whole page and taking the screenshots one by one, and then instead of one screenshot, I had like 10 screenshots. So yeah, that was painful. But let's get back to Docker. That is very fortunate because Cypress already provides a Docker image, and I think like Playwright and other things like that do as well. And this allows you to run the test in the same environment everywhere. Locally, CI/CD pipeline, like wherever you want. And I used like this very simple project, which just like prepared the dependencies, copied the directory into there, and then ran the test, which was great. It started to work. It started to fail because I generated my images on MacBook, and so I started to think about how I will get the images from Docker and into Docker, because with Docker containers, it's not really easy to get in there into that file system. So that brings me to Docker Compose, which allows you usually to compose multiple Docker services together. So you can have like your backend server and your database at the same time, and they'll talk to each other. And it allows a few nice things as well, which one of them is the volumes, which allows you to mount your directory from your computer into the container, so that the container interacts with your files and doesn't have like a separate environment for itself. So that allowed me to generate images in there, and then have them in the repository available. And the other thing was that if I copied my project in there with my node modules, there's one small thing that some dependencies are compiled for your target system, for example, MacBook. But if you run the node modules in Linux, it will explode. So yeah, I had to like shadow that and a lot of other stuff. Yeah, so that started to work, and I was very happy. I had like the tests everywhere. They started to pass in the CI/CD pipeline. It was pretty much perfect. But there are a few like small caveats that I would add to it, and a lot of them come down to when to generate the screenshots. Because if you change like one small part on one page, that doesn't affect anything else. For example, you have a footer on your about page. That's fine. That doesn't affect your other pages. But if you have like a button that's a component I use pretty much everywhere, you have to think about where it is used and if you want to regenerate your screenshots as well, or if you want like to risk it and like let's say okay, I will introduce a possible regression there. So yeah, that's a big something to think about. And then there is like a big elephant in the room, which is dynamic content. How do you deal with this thing? Because you can't really time it. If you run Cypress like 10 times, you will always get a different part of this animation. Or if you have dynamic content like social media page, you will always get like different things in there. And the plugin, fortunately, has a like a recommended approach to this, and it's lazy as well. It's just adding visibility hidden CSS attributes to your attributes that are dynamic, so that before you take a screenshot, they get hidden. And this is like this is what my example approach uses. And here I'm using CSS modules, so my CSS classes have the same name everywhere, and I can just use the has motion and then hide it. But if you are using something like styled components, for example, which auto-generates the names for the classes every time, yeah, it's a pain in the ass. And yeah, so that's like one big takeaway from this is to have the environment stable everywhere, and or adding like a lot of like data test tags so that you can filter them out. Yeah. So with the talk done, what did we learn about this? For visual regression testing, it is very important to have the stable environment. Like, so you can have the test deterministic, which applies obviously to every kind of test. If you want to have the test results reliable, you need to have your test reliable. Yeah, and getting everything lined up in Cypress or like any other front-end testing thing, yeah, it's not easy. Like Docker makes it more variable, but then you have to deal with Docker, and then that's a lot of like kind of worms everywhere. Yeah, and the last thing is I think the anti-aliasing, just like so you should be aware, like it exists. It's like it can cause a lot of pain for you if you're like, testing with it, but it's actually not like evil. And like with that done, before we go to questions, I would just like to quickly show you how it works in practice. So I have like a React project here, and I would simulate like what is pretty much I think large source of bugs, which is just adding like having a fat finger, adding suddenly 10 REM of padding, and then if I run the visual regression test, which start up the server inside Docker, it waits for it to be available and then starts the Cypress tests. Oh, and it failed. And
well, we don't know if it was passing before, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. I mean, it's already too late, fortunately. Yeah, but here in the directory where I store the snapshots, here is the actual image that I've broken. Like yeah, it's a lot of text, very beautiful Comic Sans. And if I look at the div image, which I can hide this, and it's here, like this is the div image. And that just tells me that there should be text here, but it actually moved here, and it's for the whole page. And this can cause the error threshold to be like 50% or something like that. So, and this doesn't apply just to text. Obviously, if you moved your buttons like to 10 pixels to the right, this would catch it as well. If your error threshold is low enough. Like for example, in here, I think in the commands I have it set to 3%. I think I started with 1%, and then my colleague ran the project at his computer today and found out that actually there was a lot of bugs in there, and I had to raise it from 1% to 3% after fixing everything. So this is like one big takeaway as well. Like you can start with your threshold very low, like optimistically with 1%. But the reality will be that not everything will line up every time. For example, scroll bars can cause some issues or like some dynamic content, and you have to raise it 3%, 4%, whatever suits your project. And you can set the error threshold per screenshot, so it's not like you only take screenshots with 1% or 10%, but you can actually like mix and match depending on the content on your screen. And yeah, and I think here's the has motion thing, which you can use Cypress selector, so it's not like only limited to CSS classes, but it's still you have to have a way of knowing which elements you want to hide. And if you don't have like something this easy, you have to go back to your project and tag everything with the data test tags or something like that. So yeah, it's not like a silver bullet for everybody. And I think it's like mostly targeted at projects that have like very high demands for their visuals, or they have like very demanding designers that can get angry very easily. Yeah. So yeah, with that done, I think that's everything from me, and if we can go to questions.
Great, thank you. Before we go to the questions, I just wanted to say that we are also very lazy developers, and we ended up just running in the CI/CD pipeline. We are not running in locally, so we didn't have to do the Docker stuff. So how many questions do we have for this round? One?
We have 2 questions
Okay.
already. So
Great. So
anyway, if I speak this direction, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. 3. Wouldn't it be better to test core UI components in isolation rather than testing the entire application? That is the page.
I think that might be applicable like our project. Like if you have like static website that doesn't have the components available, or like it's not because this is not limited to React or something like that. Yeah, it depends on your use case. If you have like the components, Cypress can do component testing just like Storybook, and Storybook can do visual testing as well. But in Storybook, it's limited to their plugin, which is sending the screenshots online, and then it's like I think $150 per month. So it's not like completely viable in there. But for Cypress, you can do component testing, and if you already have component testing per component, this might be a great addition in there as well.
Do you see any trends in visual regression testing we should be aware of?
I'm actually not aware of any, but I think especially with I don't know, the advances of React and other frameworks, it might make sense to have this like for metrics with matrices, and have like one test running for desktop viewport, and then some for mobile, things like that, because this is applicable to that as well.
Okay. What was the most funniest or unexpected bug that you have discovered with your visual regression tests?
Yeah, I think it was today actually when my colleague ran the project on his computer, and we found out that I'm not sure actually how it happened, but when I ran the screenshots inside Docker, there were fonts missing. Like I had for this slide, there is impact font on there, but when we ran it inside Docker, it wasn't there. It just like fall back to something different, and we found out that like if you want to have impact font, you have to run Debian, and you have to run on Ubuntu and on Debian. So it was like just like yeah. Windows fonts are very funny. And in the end, I think I switched to some like open source Comic Sans alternative to get around it, at least for this talk.
is it?
I'm sorry, I was
Yeah.
not linked. Can I ask an offline question?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
hard for me
that's
to
fine. Performance. These tests are normally very slow. Can you solve it somehow?
Yeah, I think when I timed it like running just Cypress tests and then having this additionally to it as well, like there is no difference between normal Cypress test and then the Cypress test with this screenshot, because it's already using what Cypress has to offer. But yeah, Cypress is very slow, at least like compared to unit tests with I don't know, Jest or Vitess. Yeah, but if you already have like Cypress pipeline, this might make sense for you. just like adding this command in there as well.
Could I have another offline question?
Of course.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask about the flakiness, you know, like between test runs, even if you run the same test several times, did you notice a lot of flakiness, especially if the page has a lot of complicated elements that it's rendering?
Yeah, that depends. Like with the error threshold, you have to like find the sweet spot, because like for the static side, you can go as low as 1%. But when you start to introduce like the motion elements, like I did in there as well, you have to either hide them to improve your flakiness, or just like raising the threshold like incrementally. Because when in my experience at least, like even running on the Docker Linux, there was just like, I don't know, 0.5% like chance that it would like flip that up and down. So it's like there's some statistical like differences. Like I don't know, the scroll bar position when scrolling, it's not perfectly aligned every time. So it's like, I don't know, 0.5% error threshold is there. So it's like a balancing act between like reliability and flakiness.
Maybe.
So it's not pixel perfect, is it?
Yeah.
There's actually a similar question online. How many issues did it find, and how often do you have to just update snapshots?
I think it found. Fortunately, I was not like running for projects that were active, like actually developed. It was just like updating dependencies and things like that. So it found like, I don't know, 5, 10 issues, like 5 to 10 for like, I don't know, 5 projects. But yeah, the running this.
From how many tests, sir?
I think totally it was like 60 screenshots, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that was fun, but the other part, the screenshots. Yeah, that really depends like how your team sets it up. If you like have only updating the dependencies, like let's say Tailwind from like minor version to minor version, you don't have to do anything. Ideally, if there's like not like some major change in Tailwind, but if you like change your core component, let's say button or a link that affects like a lot of pages at once, you have to like go through them individually and just like, decide, yes, this changed and this is indeed a change, or this is not indeed a change, and I have to like switch it back. So it's like it's not fully automated; it's like semi-automated test actually in this regard.
Good. If there are no more questions, we are done. Thank you very much. And now, please hold on, Carol will actually raffle the winner. If you are not interested in the raffle, but you are interested in some beers after, please hold on, because we actually gonna go for some beers to a pub nearby as usual. And I think that's it. Otherwise, so Carol prepared this long query for ChatGPT to tell him the context, and now he's gonna ask about the results based on the
with one more sentence, because it was crucial last time.
nebo kdyby až bude vás, ale ne. Který ho shiftu říká vás, no, že třeba nemají implementovaný nějakou dnešní mídii.
Looks like it's not
Prostě musíš často vyplnit
this
username,
time.
na
So
další krok.
I will just
Paul?
I don't know. I will just try to work from Windows 7 to restart.
Let's see how capable ChatGPT is.
Maybe you can't option shift based without the formatting.
Je fakt zvláštní, protože jak říkáš nějaký fix tady máte, ale zároveň, kdyby se mohli
So the winner is what was the most funniest or unexpected part. So the very last question of the part which was it yours? Okay.
So do we have?
It's me.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Napíš mi potom někde mail, nebo já ti dám svůj a mě ten potom ten mail, protože oni ho, respektive já tě s nima propojím a oni ti ho vydají mail na to.